Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know that it has been a little bit since I last posted a video for you, but I thought that we needed a little bit of a refresher, and some of the things that we're going to be doing today and tomorrow require a little bit more support. So we are going to jump right in. So we are obviously continuing with our reading of Romeo and Juliet. We have finished Act 1. We are very much into Act 2. And we're going to be reading Act 2, Scene 2 today. And mostly what we're going to be focusing on is how can we use close reading to understand central idea in Romeo and Juliet. So we're going to be looking closely at central idea. Um, and I realize that there is a typo over here. So sorry about that. That is central idea. And I'm going to be reminding you about what central idea is in a little bit. But before we do that, we're going to obviously do our reading recap. So starting all the way in the prologue, and I'm trying to make this quick since we already read all this. So the prologue basically introduces the two fighting families, the Montagues and the Capulets, two members of them, member of the Montague family, one member of the Capulet family will fall in love, and it will ultimately end in their deaths, and that is the only thing that is going to stop these two families from fighting. Act 1, Scene 2, we have two members of the Capulet family, Samson and Gregory, see a servant of the Montague family. They get into a verbal altercation. They're going back and forth until someone from the Capulet side bites their thumb, which is a very disrespectful act. It's kind of like the middle finger, and this turns into a fight. We got Benvolio, who is a Montague, on one side. He has his sword drawn, but he's trying to keep the peace. He's trying to get them to stop fighting, but Tybalt, a Capulet, sees his sword drawn and says, I hate you, I hate peace, let's fight. So it turns into a really giant fight until the prince rolls up and he stops the fight and he says that the next people who fight will be put to death. So Lord Montague asks his nephew Benvolio where his son Romeo is, and he says, I can't really find Romeo, but I'm going to go find out where he is. We meet our Romeo, and when we meet our Romeo, we find out that he is in love with this girl named Rosalind, but Rosalind does not love him back, and he is just so brokenhearted about it. He cannot stop crying and being so sad. So his cousin Benvolio gets the bright idea that he's going to try and keep him, trying to make him feel better a little bit. Act 1, Scene 2. We have Capulet talking with the County Paris, who is again another nobleman in Verona, and Paris has expressed interest in marrying his young daughter Juliet. And now initially, Capulet is very happy about this, but he wants Paris to wait until Juliet is a little bit older because Juliet is only 13 years old. So he wants him to wait about 2 years until Juliet is 15 years old. Paris says okay, and Capulet, as kind of consolation, invites him to this party that he's having. It's a masquerade party, so everybody's going to be wearing masks, which is important later, so that he can potentially woo Juliet. And they leave. On another street, we have Benvolio is walking with Romeo, and they come upon another servant from the Capulet family, and this servant has a scroll. Now, the servant was supposed to tell who's ever on this scroll about this party, and this is the invitation list, but the big problem is this servant can't read. So he doesn't really know what he's supposed to do with it. And he asks Romeo to read it. Romeo does read it and realizes that Rosalind is on the guest list for this party. So he gets the bright idea with Benvolio to sneak into this Capulet party that is happening later that night. Act 1, Scene 3. We are introduced to Lady Capulet, Miss Juliet, and the nurse. And once again, I want to make clear that the nurse is not like a medical nurse. She's more of Juliet's nanny. She's really the one that raised her and took care of her when she was a baby, fed her, changed her, all of that. So Lady Capulet asks her daughter Juliet if she's ever thought of marriage. And Juliet really hasn't thought about it much. She says that it's an honor she dare not dream of. She hasn't really thought about marriage, doesn't really want to get married on account of her being so young. But her mother tells her, well, you better start thinking about marriage because the County Paris wants to marry you. And Juliet says, I'm not really sure. Well, her mother also tells her that County Paris is at the party downstairs. So Juliet says, I guess I'll look. I'll talk to him, but I'm not really promising anything. And that's really all that Lady Capulet can hope for in this situation. Juliet isn't making any promises, but she'll do it. She'll be dutiful. She'll do it to be respectful to her parents. Act 1, Scene 4, again, not really super important. If you were in any of the Google Meets when we did our summaries before, we said that we had you watch this scene because there wasn't a lot in terms of dialogue that you really needed to know. Only thing that you really need to know is we have Benvolio, Romeo, and our boy Mercutio, and the three of them are trying to sneak into this Capulet party, this Capulet masquerade party. Romeo is just being a sad sack. He's just so brokenhearted over Rosalind, and Mercutio's kind of giving him a hard time about it. But what is really essential about this scene that you really should pay attention to is the foreshadowing that happens right before Romeo enters. We have the original text over here, but I'll just read from the modern text where he says, I have a feeling this party tonight will be a start of something bad, something that will end in my own death. But whoever's in charge of where my life's going can steer me wherever they want. Onward. So this is an example of foreshadowing because we know that he's going to meet Juliet at this party and kind of get this whole plot going. So this is the author telling us this is where it starts. This is the author foreshadowing all of this, foreshadowing the end, foreshadowing everything that's going to happen. Act 1, Scene 5 is the party scene. So Romeo enters the party. He sees Juliet across the room, and it is over. It is just love at first sight. They are so happy with each other. And Romeo says, I need to go meet this girl. I need to go see who she is. But Tybalt, if we remember Tybalt from way back in Act 1, Scene 1, he recognizes Romeo by his voice, even though, because remember, everybody's wearing a mask. So he recognizes Romeo by his voice and goes to fight him. He goes to throw him out and make a big fuss because he's not supposed to be here. But Lord Capulet tells him to chill out. He says that Romeo is still a nobleman in this town, and he's not really doing anything bad. So we should leave him alone. Tybalt says, fine, but I'm not gonna forget this. Meanwhile, we cut back to Romeo and Juliet, and they are just completely in love with each other. They're making out, they're being, teenagers until the nurse interrupts them and tells Juliet that her mother is looking for her. So Juliet leaves, and Romeo asks the nurse who she is. And she tells him that she is the daughter of Capulet, and he is just so upset. He's so sad that he's he's in love with this person that's on the opposite side, and he's so upset that he leaves the party. Juliet then comes back and asks the nurse who to find out who Romeo is, and when the nurse comes back, she tells her that Romeo is a Montague, and she is just so upset about it, and she decides to run away into her room. So that is the end of Act 1. Then we had you read Act 2 prologue. Now the Act 2 prologue really isn't too important. That's why we lumped it together with the first scene, because those first two scenes in Act 2 aren't super essential. All you really need to know is that Romeo is so in love with Juliet. The chorus is reminding us that these two are so in love and they just can't stand it. Rosalind, who they're kind of upset that they're on the opposite sides, but they really kind of don't care. But what is super important to remember from the Act 2 prologue is that the audience reminds us that they are in an imminent danger, that this isn't going to go well. It's reminding us from that very first prologue, hey, remember how there's going to end in suicide? Yeah, it's still going to end in suicide. So the audience, so the chorus is foreshadowing the end of the play in this prologue. Again, this play is very long. It is 4 acts, so the characters kind of need to remind you about where it's going every now and again. Act 2, Scene 1. Again, a very non-essential scene. We have Benvolio and Mercutio, and they're walking around trying to figure out where Romeo went. They're calling for him. Um, can't really figure it out. They don't know where he's at. They lost him at the party. They still kind of think that he's in love with Rosalind, so they think he may have went to go find Rosalind. But then Benvolio says that he saw him jump over some orchard. Okay? And that leads us all the way up to today's reading. Now, before I let you go to begin our reading, I'm going to go over very briefly central idea, because that is what we're going to be focusing on today and tomorrow. So just to remind you, a central idea is a major message that an author tries to teach a reader through their text. So it's something sort of like a lesson or the moral to the story. Think about it that way, of what the author is trying to teach you. One single text can have multiple central ideas, especially text as long and detailed and intense as Romeo and Juliet. Short stories that we've read in the past usually only have 1 or 2 central ideas, but bigger books and longer novels and plays tend to have multiple central ideas. A central idea, this is very, very important. A central idea is not a single word. A central idea is a phrase. So let's say we have an idea like this called like love. Obviously, love is very much involved in Romeo and Juliet, but love itself is not a central idea. It's just a single word. We consider that more of a topic. Okay? So when we ask you to think about central idea, we ask you to think about something a little deeper. So something that's not a single word. Now, a phrase like love conquers all, which basically means that love, true love, can conquer any sort of obstacle, that is a central idea because it is teaching you something about this topic of love. It has a message. It is a lesson that you can learn and apply to your own life. So when in doubt, when you have a topic, love, destiny, fate, think about, what is the author trying to teach me about this topic? So not just love, but what is the author trying to teach me about love? Not destiny. What is the author trying to teach me about destiny? What do they want me to take away from this story about the topic of destiny, about love, about conflict, about parents and families and drama? What is the author trying to get me to understand about that topic? So once again, and I cannot stress this enough, central idea is not a single word. Not love, not destiny, not fate, but what is the author trying to teach me about destiny, love, fate? So for your assignment for today, you're going to click the link and you're going to read Act 1, Scene 2. After you read the Act 1, Scene 2 from your um, No Fear Shakespeare website, you're going to click the handout where you will choose one central idea from the list that we provided. We provided you about 4 different central ideas, and they're all valid central ideas. You're going to choose one of them, and you're going to choose and explain 2 quotes that support that central idea from what we read today from Act 2, Scene 2. When you're quoting, be sure that you are quoting from the original text and not from the modern text. As always, we will be here with the next 30 minutes to answer any questions that you have. And as always, have a great day.